Kitchen knives are expensive, and you use them every day, so it's not a purchase you want to get wrong. To help you avoid a regretful purchase, I'm going to break down the 7 biggest mistakes people make when buying kitchen knives. After testing and reviewing over 100 knives, I've learned which factors actually matter and which ones are just marketing hype. By the end, you'll know exactly what to look for when buying kitchen knives, how to avoid getting ripped off by marketing gimmicks, and why a knife that feels perfect in someone else's hand might feel completely wrong in yours. And to make shopping even easier, I'm going to give you a list of questions that you can email to brands or bring with you to stores to confirm all the important details before you buy. The biggest reason you'll end up hating a knife is the handle. If the handle doesn't feel right in your hand, it doesn't matter how sharp the blade is or how well it retains an edge. There are dozens of handle shapes out there, including classic Western styles with a curved butt end, Japanese wah handles with 8 sides, smooth rounded designs, and everything in between. Rounded handles are more comfortable, but they're more prone to rotating when you chop and may force you to grip harder. And with Japanese knives, some D-shaped handles aren't meant for righties, so they can feel awkward if you're a lefty. You don't want a handle that's too thick or too thin, and you want some texture or curve to it so it doesn't get slippery. You also want to avoid knives with sharp edges in 2 key areas: the spine, which is the top edge of the blade, and the choil, which is the curved cutout where the blade meets the handle. When you use a pinch grip, your thumb and forefinger rest on these areas. If they're not rounded or smoothed, they'll dig into your fingers and hurt. Another thing to pay attention to is the bolster, which is the metal piece where the blade meets the handle. Some knives have a thick, full bolster that adds heft and prevents your hand from slipping onto the blade, but it can get in the way when you're pinching the blade, and it makes sharpening the entire edge difficult because the heel is too thick. Other knives have a half bolster with a tapered or sloped design, which gives your fingers a comfortable resting place without blocking access to the heel of the blade. And some knives skip the bolster entirely. The best design comes down to what feels right to you. I personally prefer either no bolster or a sloped one. It's hard to judge handles online, so the best approach is to go somewhere you can hold a few knives. Some stores even let you test them. If that's not an option, buy a few knives, test them out for a couple days, and then return the ones that don't feel right. Just make sure to check the return policy before you buy. Another mistake is not thinking about weight and balance, and these 2 things can completely change how a knife feels and performs. Before I get into that, I want to quickly thank Averon for sponsoring this video. I've been using their strong rower for almost a year now, and it's one of the few workouts that I genuinely look forward to doing. And a big reason for that is because of the games. So when you turn on the system, you can navigate to games, and there you have a bunch of different choices. I really like this one called Fishing Frenzy, where you're on a boat casting a line, and when you hook a fish, you actually have to row hard to reel it in. It sounds simple, but it's super challenging and ends up being a solid workout. I also really like this game called Blaster Brigade, where you're flying through a forest, blasting bugs and other creatures that pop up. The faster you row, the stronger your shots. And Boss Breaker might be the one I play the most. The way it works is you're keeping a ball in play to break bricks above you, and your paddle only expands when you row. When the ball starts dropping, you have to row really fast to make sure the paddle expands in time. This one is surprisingly addictive. I was skeptical at first, but these games actually keep me consistent. I end up rowing longer just to try to beat my old scores. If you struggle to stay consistent because your workouts feel repetitive, give the Averon Strong Rower a try. It really does make fitness something you want to do. You can use the code and the link in the video description to save $50 off your order. So I mentioned the importance of weight and how it's a mistake to overlook it. A heavier knife uses its own momentum to slice through food, so you're not pushing as hard. But if it's too heavy, your wrist will get tired quickly. A lighter knife gives you more control and agility for detailed work, but if it's too light, it can feel flimsy and requires more effort to push through cuts instead of letting the blade do the work. For context, Western style 8-inch chef's knives are usually on the heavier side, around 6 to 9 ounces, while lightweight Japanese chef's knives are typically around 5 to 7 ounces. Balance is just as important as weight. If the blade is too heavy relative to the handle, the knife tips forward and you'll constantly be fighting to keep it stable. If the handle is heavier, the blade feels disconnected and harder to control. A well-balanced knife will feel centered and steady right where the blade and the handle meet. A big contributor to balance is the part of the knife called the tang, which is the piece of metal that extends from the blade into the handle. A full tang runs through the entire handle and adds weight and stability toward the back. A partial tang only goes partway in, which keeps the handle lighter and shifts more weight toward the blade. Both options work fine, they just create different balance points. Most brands list weight in their specs, so that gives you a good starting point, but balance is something that you really just need to feel for yourself. The third mistake is buying a blade shape that doesn't match your cutting style. The curve of the edge is the biggest factor because it dictates how you cut. Western-style chef's knives typically have a deeper belly, which means the blade curves more from heel to tip. This design is made for a rocking motion, where you keep the tip on the board and rock the blade back and forth. The Gyuto, which is the Japanese version of a chef's knife, has a flatter edge with less curve. Instead of rocking, you use an up and down motion, lifting the blade completely off the board between cuts. One style is not better than the other, but if you prefer rocking, a knife with a rounded belly will feel more natural. Blade height is another thing people overlook. A narrow blade might look sleek, but if it's too short, your knuckles will scrape the cutting board every time you chop. Taller blades aren't as nimble, but they give you more knuckle clearance. The height of the tip also matters. Most knives have a gradual curve to both the belly and spine, but some, like the Zwilling Pro, have a straighter spine, which means the tip is higher. So you have to hold the handle much higher to use the tip. The fourth mistake is not paying attention to blade geometry. If the blade is too thick behind the cutting edge, the knife pushes food apart instead of slicing through it cleanly. The problem is, most brands don't mention geometry in their product descriptions, and you can't really tell from photos. The best way to check is to hold the knife in person. Gently pinch the blade about a 1/4 inch above the cutting edge. If it feels thick or blocky, the knife will drag through food instead of slicing cleanly. You'll feel this right away when you cut through something dense like a potato or a carrot. You should also check the spine of the knife. A blade that thins out toward the tip will be lighter and easier to control. If the spine stays thick all the way through, the knife will feel clunky. Unfortunately, this is hard to evaluate when shopping online, which is why buying a knife and testing it at home or asking detailed questions before buying is so valuable. The fifth mistake is either ignoring the type of steel that the blade is made from or obsessing over it way too much. Both extremes will steer you wrong. Some knife brands don't even disclose what steel they use in the product description, and that's a red flag. At minimum, you should know the name of the steel before you buy it so you can look it up and see what you're getting. But on the flip side, some people overpay for knives just because the steel sounds impressive. Steel is just iron mixed with carbon and a few other elements. There are dozens of formulas, but they all try to balance 3 things: how long the edge stays sharp, how well it resists rust, and how durable it is. The simplest and most useful thing for home cooks to focus on is hardness, which most brands actually disclose online. Hardness is measured on the Rockwell scale. Harder steel at 60 to 66 on the Rockwell scale stays sharp longer, but is more likely to chip and more difficult to sharpen. Softer steel around 54 to 57 Rockwell dulls faster, but it's less likely to chip and easier to resharpen. Here's an easy way to think about it. A blade made of Play-Doh would lose its edge right away, but it's easy to reshape. A blade made of diamond would stay sharp much longer, but would also be difficult to reshape once it dulled. If you don't want to worry about chips, you don't want to baby your knives, and you want something that you can resharpen quickly, choose a softer steel. If you want the longest lasting edge and you're careful with your knives, go with a harder steel. The next mistake is thinking that forged knives are automatically better than stamped knives. Forged knives are made by heating a bar of steel and hammering it into shape. Stamped knives are cut from a flat sheet of steel and then ground into shape. For years, brands have marketed forged knives as superior, so people developed a bias to always think that stamped blades are lower quality. But in reality, the method of construction doesn't impact performance as much as you would think. Other factors like hardness and geometry play a bigger role in how well the knife cuts and how long it stays sharp. A well-designed stamped knife can outperform a poorly designed forged knife. For example, the Mac MTH80 is stamped, but it's one of the best knives I've tested. Mac grinds the blade thin from spine to edge, so it cuts effortlessly and it's light and balanced. The fact that it's stamped doesn't really matter. That said, some cheap stamped knives are made from steel that's so thin and soft that the blade flexes as you cut. A little flex is normal for specialty knives like fillet knives, but a chef's knife shouldn't bend easily. Buying a big knife set is usually a big waste of money. Those 14 or 16 piece blocks look like a good deal, but you'll only use 2 or 3 of the knives and the rest will sit in the block. Most home cooks only need an 8-inch chef's knife, a serrated bread knife, and a paring knife. A Nikiri or Santoku is a nice bonus, but you don't need much more than that. Instead of buying a huge knife set, you'll get more value by buying the exact knives you need or a small 3-piece starter set. And definitely avoid self-sharpening blocks, because the ceramic inserts grind your knives unevenly and wear them out faster. To make shopping for knives even easier, Here are the questions you should ask before buying any kitchen knife. Pause the video to read, or go to the video description where you can easily copy and paste the questions into an email or print them out to bring to a store. If you're ready to start comparing brands, check out this video where I do rapid fire reviews of 27 of the most popular chef's knives. I've also linked to some of my favorite brands in the video description. And for more videos like this, click the logo to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.